Peyton Randolph House, built in 1715 and purchased by Sir John Randolph, the only colonial Virginian ever to be knighted in 1721. The eastern lot purchased in 1724. In 1737, Sir John Randolph passed away. Since then, over 24 people have met their end in that house or on the grounds. The USA Today calls it one of the most haunted places in the United States. When Sir John Randolph passed away, his son Peyton took over. Peyton, he was a cousin of Thomas Jefferson, president of the First and Second Continental Congresses, and one of the founding fathers of America. The catalyst for the supernatural activity that occurs in that house began with the outbreak of the American Revolution. When the American Revolution broke out, Lord Dunmore, governor of Williamsburg, proclaimed that all slaves who abandoned their rebel owners and aided the British would be granted their freedom at the end of the war. Many of the Randolph slaves took advantage of this, including Mrs. Randolph's slave, Eve. Well, we all know how that war turned out, and when the slaves were returned to their owners, many of them were brutally treated. Some were beaten, some were bloodied, some were killed. Eve was treated horribly by Mrs. Randolph, to the point where upon Mrs. Randolph's death, she still wanted to get back at Eve. She sold Eve, forever separating her from her son. The anger had been set. This led to a lot of misfortune that occurred in the house. It was recorded that 2 men shot each other in a duel inside that house. 2 children, years apart, met their end by falling in similar locations. And a Civil War veteran mysteriously died, and nobody knows how to this day. One of the earliest accounts of supernatural activity occurring in that house comes from Marquis de Lafayette, one of the most renowned French generals who fought in the American Revolution. In October of 1824, he was doing a grand tour of the United States to talk to veterans of the American Revolution. As he walked through the house, he felt a nudge on his shoulder, almost preventing him from entering. He looked around and nobody was there. Lafayette himself wrote that the nights were restless as the sounds of voices kept him awake for most of his stay. In the 1930s, 2 archaeologists working for Williamsburg Historical Society, or Colonial Williamsburg, did excavations on that house. It didn't take long for them to find anything, because all they had to do was dig 8 inches down, and they found 2 remnants of Indians who were buried there. The fact that they found the remnants so quick and saw that there were so many structures on this land indicated that there were more Native American remains that have been disturbed. Many of these people knew that when they built their houses on this land, that they were destroying Native American artifacts. The archaeologists said, don't disturb them, let them be. But that didn't happen. These people wanted their property back, or what they considered their property. In fact, one woman called up demanding that anything they found on her land she'd be allowed to keep. In fact, the care for this land wasn't high at all. The National Park Service in 1941 decided they're going to build a part of the National Historic Parkway under this land. They decided to build a tunnel for this parkway right under the eastern part of the Peyton Randolph house, right where the two known Indian remains rested. They did it. They built the park right through the Indian remains. Since then, many supernatural occurrences have happened throughout the house and on the grounds. In the 1960s, the house was used to house excess students from the College of William and Mary. One student reported feeling a light tug as he slept. He counted to being dreaming. However, this dream was proven a reality as his bed violently began to shake. He startled, he jumped up. He realized he was the only one in that room. He ran out of the house never to return, not even for his own belongings. Years later, a local security guard was doing his rounds. He happened upon the Peyton Randolph house. When he was doing his rounds inside the house, he went to the basement and heard another worldly scream. He didn't know what it was, and he freaked out. As he went to flee, he felt his ankles anchored to the ground. Unable to move, he desperately tried to dial his radio. Eventually he got through, and 10 minutes later, help had arrived. However, they were unable to open the door. They found that the basement door was wedged. It took so much force to bust through that door, and when they finally did, the security guard was released from his invisible trap. To this day, they don't have an answer for it. Even a few more years later, there was an elderly woman who lived in the eastern part of the Peyton Randolph house. She would constantly call security, reporting about children crying, laughing, and other noises. Every time security checked, there was nothing. Shortly after that lady passed away in 2000, the fire alarm went off in the Peyton Randolph house. Security ran, but they were unable to get inside. Nobody had a key. They were unable to access the newly required property. They had to bust them through a window. When they did, they found a fire extinguisher standing up in the middle of the room with all of its contents expended. However, the contents never touched any furniture in the room, never touched the walls, and only stayed in that room. They looked around and they didn't see any footprints in the white material. And they couldn't find the pin for the fire extinguisher. Well, they lifted the fire extinguisher up and saw there was a clean floor underneath. How is this possible? There wasn't any footprints, no sign of intruder. The fire extinguisher was in the middle of the room, stationary, as it expended all of its contents. How? During tours of the house, many people experience many different things. One time, when we were giving a tour, we had 6 EMF detectors, fully charged. As we were walking the grounds, all 6 died at the moment we began to talk about the history of the Peyton Randolph house. The most chilling experience was when the temperature dropped over 20 degrees and went from uncomfortably hot to frigid in a matter of seconds, and everybody felt it. Who knows what walked through our very bodies? Many people, over the course of the years, have passed out in front of the house, requiring medical attention. Many people experience these bone-tingling effects. Whatever you decide to do, just be aware that we are not the only ones that go bump in the night.